Good relevant time of day to you all. I'm Seamus the Hug Monster, and this is Tales of Tear. Orion is not a commonly known name. The commander kept his origins secret so his enemies could never use them against him. Still, many places and peoples claim the commander as theirs. Which one is true, if any, is a secret the commander took to his grave. But this is not about how the commander died. At least, not yet. The Mosun Empire is not where most people think of when they think of the Watchguard, but is where the first sparks started. A young scion of a powerful political family expected to become a wealthy and powerful lord in his own right, he denounced his own nobility and defied everything to join the army. He made the focus of his life to protect the common people, rising through the ranks due to the hard work and natural leadership abilities. When the Mosun Emperor triggered yet another pointless, greed-fueled war, the now general was powerless to stop the oncoming tide of bloodshed. Refusing to take part, he deserted. The Mosun Emperor could not let the desertion of a general go unpunished. Being a proud man as well, he sent his most vicious detachment to pursue the general. If not to return with him alive for public execution, to make sure his death was long and painful. The general proved to be a difficult and dangerous quarry, losing more men to one man than they did in many whole campaigns. They eventually gave up after chasing him into the desert, believing the harsh and arid climate would succeed where they had failed. Knowing their fate should they return to the Emperor empty-handed, they found a farmer that bore a passing resemblance to the general, and bet him so that none could say the face wasn't the general's, then decapitated him, to bring the Emperor the head he had demanded of them. The general trudged through the desert, constantly teetering between life and death, searching for a new purpose. Delirious and half-starved to death, the ground beneath his feet began to shake. He feared being swallowed by some great beast lurking beneath the sands. Instead, it was an ancient, peaceful race of sand golems. With the golems' permission and help, the Watchguard constructed a great fortress amongst the dunes that would serve as their base. For years, the general, now named Rex, bolstered the ranks of the Watchguard, intent on nipping injustice all across Tear at their roots. Rex had left on a recruitment mission with a small platoon when the Mosun Emperor struck. Many of the injustices the Watchguards were nipping at the roots belonged to him, and he would brook no challenge to his rule. The Emperor was vicious, the fortress razed, and everyone who had been there was killed, if not in the fighting, then staked and left to the sun. For helping the Watchguard, the sand golems were hunted to near extinction. His guilt immeasurable, Rex vowed to avenge his fallen comrades and the gentle sand golems. He gathered what remained of the Watchguard and marched towards the Mosun Empire, intent on taking the Emperor's head or die trying. En route he met a hero, bound towards the now destroyed fortress, intent on joining the Watchguard. On hearing what had happened, they talked Rex out of his suicide march, instead laid out a plan to rebuild the Watchguard, in such a way that even the Mosun Empire couldn't destroy it this time. Rex, still consumed by remorse, gave command of the Watchguard to the stranger while he grieved. The commander kept true to their promise and rebuilt the Watchguard. Once Rex was recovered, the commander offered him his position as the leader of the Watchguard back, but Rex was done with leading. Content to command smaller units in battle and missions, the commander became the permanent leader of the Watchguard. For the dwarves, nothing is more valuable than the use of one's own hands. A self-sufficient people, they pride themselves on their crafting abilities and wartime prowess. Whether for creation or destruction, even the lowliest of dwarves, by their own standards, wields a hammer with expert precision compared to any other race. Borat, the brass heart bruiser, had been devastated when he lost his hands in battle against the vampires. Killing him would have been kinder than returning a dwarf that had no hands. Upon returning home and overcome with self-pity, he prepared to walk into the wilderness to die in battle against a beast he deemed worthy enough, as was the custom of his clan when one was unable to perform their duties. At the edge of his city, Dagna, his fierce apprentice, stopped him. She discovered the path to the lost city of Macropolis, a place renowned for its otherworldly forging techniques. She convinced Borat to travel with her to the lost city, where she was able to craft him mechanical hands of unprecedented power. After his return home to share the secrets of Macropolis with his people, he was approached by an outsider. Gruffly rebutting him from sharing the secrets of Macropolis, Borat was surprised that was not why the stranger had sought him out. The commander was looking for a leader who could run logistics. Every person he had asked pointed him to Borat. The commander laid out the plan for a decentralized logistics train hidden inside a network of traveling tradespeople and merchants. He told Borat of what had happened to the Watchguard and how they were rebuilding it with no central point that could be attacked and destroyed this time. Borat took some time to work out the cost to get it up and running. Using genuine merchants and tradespeople would help pay for the supplies the Watchguard would need. Keeping everybody moving would also help hide from those with prying eyes and keep the taxman at bay from discovering what was really going on. The Dwarven Association was born, and the logistics part to support the Watchguard was called the Black Market. With the logistics plan, the commander left Borat to set up the Dwarven Association and move to the next part of the plan. To be blessed by the gods is rare, but to forge your own blessing is even rarer. The young Leia was raised to be an oracle of the Sun Elves from a young age. Her destiny was to become a seer for her people, someone who could gaze into the future and predict calamities before they happened, so her people could avoid them, or if that wasn't possible, prepare to weather them. No matter how hard her caretakers tried, they could not awaken her slumbering power. Leia's connection to the gods never surfaced. Years passed and disappointment took root in the elves' hearts. Was this finally the end of their lineage of oracles? No one was as opposed to that travesty as Leia. She resolved not to wait for her power to awaken. Instead, she would find a way to trigger it herself. Leia threw herself into the study of all types of magic and religious practices for every faith she could find a book on. She learned and experimented, and eventually something in music spoke to her. Realizing the chords could transcend dimensions in a way no mortal could, Leia set about crafting her own unique instrument. Not unique in that it was a harp, unique in that it would bond with her very soul and allow her to transcend mortal barriers. The cost was high. Should anything ever happen to the harp, she would suffer physical consequences. The instrument was an extension of her mind, body, and soul. Pain was not something Leia feared. Letting down her people was the dread that filled her, and she sought her destiny at any cost. The cost was higher than she could have ever known. When she started to play, she saw a vision of a terrible future. That her people might have a chance of survival, she had to leave them. Glimpses of her new path were shown to her, but not all of it. The full path she would have to find on her own. Leaving her people and using her vast knowledge of healing, she began. She became an avowed pacifist. Raising her hand to no one, she became known as a healer without compare. She gathered a small group of other healers and went where the wars were. She would set up tents to the side of a battlefield, and any who needed healing would receive it. The camp became unspoken neutral ground. Soldiers knew their chances of survival went up a great deal if Leia had set up her camp nearby. Generals who thought Leia should only heal their soldiers, or ordered their troops to attack the camp to kill the enemy soldiers being tended to, had unfortunate accidents in their own camps. Over the centuries, it even became custom that two sides of a war would hold peace talks in Leia's camp, sometimes even asking Leia to mediate, for she would never take a side. The day the commander walked into camp, there was a page waiting for him. He escorted him directly to Leia's tent and left. The serene elf looked him up and down. "It's about time. It's almost too late." The commander looked at her surprised. "The ancient god has started his return, and you are to lead us in stopping him, Orion. I'm sorry, this will not be an easy path for any of us. I do not know that we will succeed, only that this meeting would happen, and it will be our best chance. I'm rebuilding the Watchguard to keep the evils of this world at bay. Can't turn away at the signs of the worst evil of all, can I?" Orion crossed his face. "I thought this was going to be a much harder sell." Leia laughed. I was sold 200 years ago. She got up and went over to an old chest. The lock was rusted shut. Would you mind? The commander broke the lock on the chest. Leia opened it reverently. Inside, neatly stacked, were piles of sashes, banners, tabards and medals with the insignia of the Watchguard. I got bored waiting, Leia smiled. You'll have the army you need. Word spread through the armies of Tear like wildfire. Leia the pacifist and neutral had picked a side. Not for a country, nor king, nor emperor, but for the people of Tear itself, against a great evil. Veterans quietly retired from their armies to become mercenaries. Mercenaries that were hired by silent benefactors, always in the service of the people of Tear. The Watchguard grew. The war against the ancient gods started quietly. Small groups of Watchguard would hear of a troubled spot and go in as mercenaries, hired to deal with the problem, wearing the banner of any noble who would reasonably hire them to do it. The nobles wouldn't complain. The problem got dealt with, and the goodwill of the people saved by the Watchguard's actions, and they didn't even have to pay for it. Anywhere the mercenaries saved people, they always hired a few people to keep an eye on things and report back any more trouble. So an information network was built. A few of the nobles even started quietly helping, seeing the betterment of their people as a course worth taking. A few of the more powerful nobles started realizing just how widespread the Watchguard was, and started doing the math on how many people were in the Watchguard. They started to get worried. If the full Watchguard ever assembled, it would be an army that could worry even the larger empires. Still, the Watchguard did nothing to suggest they had anything other than the best for the people of Tear in mind. The Mosun Emperor, however, didn't see things that way. He sent his spies to infiltrate the Watchguard so he would not be caught off guard should they attempt retribution for the massacre at the fortress. Still, the Watchguard carried on fighting the rising ancient god everywhere they could. The ancient god's forces weren't doing well. They would begin to form larger groups, and a larger force of Watchguard would materialize to meet them, then fade away. Formless and with no discernible lines of logistics for the enemy to strike at to cripple the Watchguard, they grew frustrated and bolder. Realizing the threat that the Watchguard had been fighting all along, kings, emperors, and other rulers started lending support and men to the Watchguard in a bid to stop the ancient god. Meanwhile, the forces arrayed against the Watchguard fell into the trap, and formed an army in an attempt to crush them once and for all. Not realizing that the Watchguard was ready for them, alongside the forces sent by various rulers, the full Watchguard took the field, and it numbered many more than the wildest estimates anyone outside the Watchguard had. The Watchguard had prepared well. Launching a surprise attack, the forces of the ancient god were knocked off balance as wave after wave of soldiers hit them. The ancient god's forces tried to retreat, only to be met by the men sent by many kingdoms surrounding them. Victory was assured when the unthinkable happened. The commander fell, slain by the enemy. Shock rippled through the Watchguard. The enemy seized the moment and broke through the Watchguard's lines. Instead of retreating, they reformed and went on the attack, not to beat the enemy, but to kill them. With no care for their own lives, only to take as many of the hated enemy with them as they could, certain victory became a bloody massacre. While the ancient god's forces were destroyed, the cost was almost the entirety of the Watchguard and the forces supporting them. The ancient god is old and wily and quite willing to sacrifice its minions for a larger victory down the line. While the kings and emperors convinced it had been defeated in a costly battle, it would spend decades rebuilding its forces, but it would still be faster than what the Watchguard could do to rebuild. The ancient god sent forth its assassins to kill every surviving member of the Watchguard they could find. Their impertinence would be rewarded with quick deaths. For its part, the Watchguard faded into the background again, staying alive and doing what they could to help the people of Tear. For over a decade, the ancient god's minions and the remainders of the Watchguard played a deadly game of cat and mouse. Leia returned to her work beside battlefields, acting as a point of contact. The assassins learned to fear going near her, not for what she would do, but that opposing armies would unite to protect her from their strikes. New leaders arose, like Ayn, an elvish prince who joined to help his people in their war with the vampires, and learnt vampires were not the worst thing his people faced. He brought in more new blood, like Livian, and her squire Theowin. Still, while their numbers remained steady, they couldn't make headway. Then Voltus, an elemental bound to the White Tower, sent word to Rex. He had found the unbelievable. The commander was alive in the deserts, fighting to protect Tear. Rex, hating to hope, went in search and found them. The commander was alive. An oracle had brought him back. She could not give him his full life back, but he could steal the power of the ancient god's minions to keep himself going. While not entirely trusting the seer called Hollow, she revealed that she could bring fallen warriors back to refill the ranks of the Watchguard. The ancient god had had his way for too long. It was time to rebuild the Watchguard again. It was time for the ancient god to know it had won a battle. The war was not over. Word is spreading. Hope returns, and evil is starting to fear the Watchguard once more. Yes, mistress, all is going as you have planned. No, they don't trust me. If anything, they're a little scared of me, but then they should be. No, he doesn't remember, at least not yet. Even if he doesn't, he's not a fool. He'll figure it out in time. I know it could cost me my existence. I knew that when I agreed to do this, but I believe in you and the mission. I know the cost should we fail. Thank you for your blessings, Mistress Aeon.